The question.
I hope we can get a permanent extension, but if the president wants to compromise on a 2 or 3 year extension, what's important here, Chris, is that businesses know what their tax rates are going to be over the next few years so they can plan growth and plan to add people.
Our next guest is Congressman Mike Pence. He's a Republican from Indiana. So, Congressman Pence, do you agree or disagree with such a compromise as the one floated out there by Senator Jim DeMint?
Hey, Jenna, good to be with you. Well, look, I think the American people spoke in deafening terms on Election Day, November the 2nd, and they said they're tired of the borrowing, the spending, the bailouts, and they're tired of more taxes and more mandates coming out of Washington, D.C. And Republicans are absolutely determined to oppose any tax increase on any American in the coming months. And, you know, the higher taxes aren't going to get anybody hired. And as we reconvene in this lame duck session, we're going to continue to fight in the House to make sure that no American sees a tax increase on January 1, not one.
So specifically, would you be for the type of compromise, again, that's been floated out there about a temporary extension for the upper income earners in order to get a permanent extension for 98% of the American public?
Well, look, I've heard the talk about compromise. Quite frankly, I haven't. That's not been the experience in the Pelosi-led Congress the last 4 years. There's not been much actual seeking of common ground. It's mostly been a my way or the highway approach to governance, and that's how it's been done by this administration as well. I just think we ought to continue to stand firmly on the principle that here in the worst economy in 25 years, the last thing we should do is allow a tax increase to take effect in January on any American. And House Republicans are going to continue to fight tenaciously to ensure that no American sees a tax increase in January of next year.
You spoke a little bit about the Pelosi-led Congress, and you're speaking of fighting now, but it seems like voters spoke out against the way things were being done, Congressman. So what's being done on the GOP side to change that, to reach across the aisle and change the tone of Washington this time around?
Well, look, we met last night. We welcomed the freshman class to the historic Statuary Hall, and we heard our incoming Speaker-elect, John Boehner, talk about not only changing the direction in Washington, D.C., but changing the way we do business. I mean, the People's House is meant to be a place where the will of the American people is heard and vetted, and that means not only members of the majority, but members of the minority being able to bring ideas in broad daylight, in committee, on the floor of the Congress, and have those issues debated. You know, I'll tell you right now, on this tax increase issue, and remember, we're not talking about tax cuts. We're talking about preserving the current tax relief that's on the books and making that permanent. If there was a fair up or down vote allowed on that in this lame duck session, I guarantee it would pass the House of Representatives by an overwhelming margin. But this Democrat majority has not allowed the will of the American people to really be played out in a full and open debate on the floor of the Congress. Republicans are going to change that, and we're going to change the direction back to fiscal responsibility, pro-growth policies, and a respect for values and respect for our military.
How?
Well, look. First thing we're going to do is we're going to turn a willing ear to the voice of the American people, who spoke, as I said, in deafening terms that they want to see this government change direction. I mean, I know that the administration and Speaker Pelosi think this was all about the economy, or it was all about a failure to communicate. But I think most people truly recognize that November 2nd, this election was a historic rejection of American liberalism and the Obama-Pelosi agenda. And Republicans are determined to turn the ship of state back in the direction of limited government, free market values, and fiscal responsibility.
Well, speaking of fiscal responsibility, another big issue besides the tax cuts has been this issue about earmarks. And it seems to be really something that some of the Tea Party-backed candidates of the Republican Party have come out with and said they really want to eliminate these earmarks as one of their first items on the agenda. But there seems to be some pushback from the old guard in the Republican Party. Why is that?
Well, look, what I'll tell you is in the House of Representatives, there is a virtually unanimous agreement about doing in this coming Congress what we did in the last Congress, and that is embracing a full-scale moratorium on earmarks among Republicans. We think we've got to end business as usual. We think we've got to end earmarks on Capitol Hill, and House Republicans are determined to do that. I wish my colleagues in the Senate, led by my dear friend Jim DeMint, all the luck, all the success in the world to get the Senate Republicans to partner with that. The American people want to see us change the way we spend the people's money here in large ways and in small ways. And I believe they're calling for a fundamental reform of the budget process, and that begins with ending earmarks.
Congressman, feel good to be back in D.C.? Kind of feel comfortable back there again?
Well, look, I said last night to a lot of gathered freshmen at the Capitol building that when my wife and I were walking up the steps, the Capitol building hadn't looked that good for a while. And with all these great conservatives coming to Capitol Hill, these courageous men and women who made the sacrifices to be a part of this rising new Republican majority, it's a good day here in Washington, D.C.
Well, we'll be watching you step by step, Congressman. Thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Jenna.
Check the calendar. It's not even